Okay, Mr. Khurshid, could you just to start off with, roll back and say what led to this Geneva meet? What caused all this action and heat to take place there?
Well, understandably, the world is taking human rights very seriously. The Vienna Convention Conference on Human Rights tried to give a direction to the interest that is being expressed the world over in human rights. And clearly, this Human Rights Commission meeting after the Vienna Conference was going to apply some of those decisions and some of those points of focus to practical situations. And ideally for Pakistan, this was it. This was the opportunity to say, right, we've expressed our concern on human rights in the world. Here's a practical situation. Let's see what you can do. For them, time is running out. After Hazrat Bal, they know that tide may turn. It's beginning to turn. We are talking of political process. Their own membership of the Security Council is coming to an end in December. So I think they feel the time's running out. They've raised the pitch in their own country because there wasn't anything else really to talk about. And everything put together, they found this was the best way. That perhaps with 50 odd countries voting, quite a few purist European countries, purist human rights countries, and 12 Islamic countries, they thought perhaps they could just get enough momentum going and pull off a resolution against India.
Right. I mean, we knew what Pakistan was doing. So what did we do as homework, to lead up to Geneva?
Well, I think call it homework, call it preparation for this, or call it really genuine concern for transparency in the system. I think it all coincided, and what we produced really there was a record of transparency, very explicit record of transparency, where we didn't have to speak for it, but somebody else spoke for that record. And the people who spoke for it were the Troika ambassadors. Their report had gone back to the EU. EU then made a country statement. Greece made it on their behalf as the presidency of the year, and they said that, look, there are problems, but there is a larger context, which is a political context, which has an aspect and dimension of terrorism. You can't solve Kashmir by getting it here. It will be solved really bilaterally, keeping in mind the terrorist aspect and the political aspect. And this is really all, in a sense, that we used as a platform to explain our explicit transparency policy. It worked. It worked. It had to work because all that people were asking for is transparency, and we were giving transparency. But it was given as part of a dialogue on human rights in the world, not as part of negotiations on a resolution brought by Pakistan against us in the General Assembly or specifically in the Human Rights Commission.
Okay, looking at the meet, what is the most significant thing that's come through? I mean, apart from transparency, what is the most significant result that's come through at Geneva?
I think the most significant result is a reaffirmation by not one but many countries. At the time that the appeal was made to Pakistan by Iran to withdraw the resolution, other countries joined in. China, several other countries of the NAM group joined in and explicitly said this is a bilateral matter, this is not the forum for a bilateral matter, let it be settled bilaterally. I think it was significant that after so much effort and a propaganda campaign led by the Prime Minister herself in Pakistan and in some very strident terms, they still couldn't score in dislodging what is India's basic position, well instilled as it were into minds of people across the globe, that this is a bilateral issue and you will only complicate matters much more if you try to bring it on a multilateral level or internationalize it.
Okay. Now, looking back again at it, I mean, there was one thing which vindicated India's stand, and that was the United Nations decision on terrorism, and I mean the Pakistan thing, and asking for a human rights solution. I mean, what is exactly that?
Well, terrorism was introduced for the first time, as you know, in Vienna, as being violative of human rights. Up to then, there were two separate tracks. They saw terrorism as one track to be handled by security agencies and so on, and human rights as another track to be handled by agencies like the Human Rights Commission. For the first time in Vienna, these two were married together, and we had a lot to do with it. Peru had a lot to do with it, and we said that that terrorism itself was violative of human rights. Not simply that it created a situation that violated human rights, but itself was a direct violation of human rights. I think this has been reaffirmed and strengthened in Geneva by passing of a unanimous resolution on terrorism. We had a lot to do with it. We had virtually drafted it. Of course, we were only co-sponsors and Peru was in the forefront, but that was strategically and tactically important. We didn't want opposition simply because if India was at the forefront, it would have been taken as though India was gradually trying to push Iran's name into this, the Pakistan's name into this resolution, and therefore resistance would have built up. There was no resistance because it came from Peru, it came in the context of the kind of terrorism they are facing, and so it went through very smoothly. But I think the point is made. The point is that UN is waking up to terrorism as the basic root of violation of human rights in many situations in the world that we face today, whether it's in North Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, or in South Asia, in our own region.
Yeah, experts also feel that shall we say, this motion of this Pakistan motion coming up in Geneva had also to do with a lot of backing from the US in forms of statements coming up from, say, from the Secretary, from Mr. Clinton himself, and various other things, which was a sort of a assurance to Pakistan that said, yeah, go ahead, we'll be behind you.
I'd really want to be fair to the US. We had a brief discussion with the head of the US delegation. Ambassador Ferraro had a discussion with Mr. Singhvi, who was there briefly to help us at Geneva. And I must say that they have taken a very balanced view. They expressed some concerns and some divergence of views with us, but they've taken a very balanced view. In their country statement, they didn't mention India. When they were asked why, they said, well, we had 10 minutes and we could only take gross violations. So which means that they didn't put India in that category. Also, we had no evidence at all of US trying to persuade people to vote against us. I think that's very important. If their previous statements that have come from time to time from the State Department or from the President himself have encouraged Pakistan, it's a different matter. But I believe that you must look, when you speak of human rights, we must look at the context in which people express these opinions. There are local constituencies that a lot of people are under pressure from. Europe, for instance, the Greenpeace movement, MPs of certain political parties who have put human rights very high on the agenda. You can't ignore that. If we want them to understand our public opinion compulsions, we must understand their public opinion compulsions as well. The record in Geneva shows that that US has been fair and balanced. I think they would have, in their explanation of vote, where they were going to abstain, they would have said a few things perhaps that we may not have liked, but it never came to that. So as the record stands, they've been very fair and very balanced. We have no reasons to complain, and we hope that this could be a turning point, that things would look better. During this period, they had one more letter that surfaced, which spoke of Khalistan from the White House, and Ambassador Ray brought this to their attention, and I'm very glad that the White House took a very explicit, categorical position that US does not take cognizance of Khalistan, and does not in fact believe that Khalistan is something that they should be concerned about. And I think that's something to be welcomed.
Yeah, the Geneva resolution also brought to light an emerging thing. That was this troika of India, Iran and China, which is being talked about so much. I mean, what do you have to say about this? This is a new power block that's emerging?
Yeah, it's still a very distant thing. There was, yes, indeed, there was some contact with China, there was some contact with Iran. As a coincidence, foreign ministers of India and Iran were both in Tehran about at the same time, but no troika meet took place. There was a coincidence of opinion and convergence of priorities at that time, but I don't think one can still talk about an emergence of this triangle. It still will take a lot of time, because we are three different countries of three different systems, having some economic objectives with three entirely different systems. China is one kind of system, Iran is one kind of system, India is a third kind of system. So for us to work closely together as a troika will take a lot of time. But bilaterally, I think there are several links: China, Iran, Iran, India, India, China. we need to develop these. I think there's an important role they can play in Asia, in economic terms and political terms. But there's a lot of work yet to be done.
Where does Indo-Pak relationship go from here now?
Well, it's a two-way thing, isn't it? I mean, if it's bilateral, it means that both have to go somewhere. I hope it comes back to the bilateral track. I hope we are able to talk sincerely and seriously. We haven't seen signs of that in the previous attempt. We hope that Pakistan will have more reasons. Whatever they may say on the surface, they'll have more serious reasons for taking bilateral talks more seriously next time round. I hope that it comes soon.
Okay. There's also been a lot of talk about attacks on you personally, and people. I mean, Pakistan has been objecting to quite a statements you've made. I mean, what do you think has caused all these things? This heartburn and mudslinging, as they say.
Well, I personally think that their pitch was very high, and perhaps they were interrupted rudely when I raised the decibels from our side a little bit. And I think what they were particularly concerned about was that I touched on some very fundamental things like reinventing Pakistan, not having a basis for identity, a foundation for identity, and therefore using Kashmir as an alibi. I think that that really hurt them where it hit them where it hurts, and therefore they reacted somewhat somewhat unpleasantly. I also think that, and this I believe was an important thing that I was able to achieve, was that we had to switch the agenda from being an Islamic Pakistan against non-Islamic India. That agenda had to be switched. We have made it clear that you use the Islamic card, you have 120 million Indian Muslims standing up to say you're wrong. And this is something that really has upset them. Why should 120 Indian Muslims say you're wrong? Well, I said that you were wrong in 1947, you were wrong in 1971, and you were wrong in 1994. And that I think they couldn't take.
And that's why they started attacking you personally.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind. My job is to be attacked. My job is to be attacked for the country. As long as my country is not attacked, I'm attacked, it's okay.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.